My guest today will be instantly recognisable to millions around the world as Captain Jean-Luc Picard of the USS Enterprise, or as Professor Charles Xavier of X-Men. But after 17 years in Hollywood, Patrick Stewart turned his back on it to return to England and to venues like this, London's Young Vic, to his first love, Shakespeare and the theatre. In his latest role, he's even playing Shakespeare. So why choose small audiences in venues like this over the glamour of Hollywood? So Patrick Stewart, welcome to Hard Talk.
Thank you.
Now, in this latest role of yours, which is production of Edward Bond's play Bingo, you're playing Shakespeare himself, and it's a production that you campaigned for, and it's the third time in, 20 years that you've played this role? Why is it so important to you?
It's technically, I think, the fourth time. I saw it when it was first done at the Royal Court Theatre. Actually, it was a second production with John Gielgud and Arthur Lowe in the two leading roles. And it thrilled me. And even though I was much too young, I fancied the role of Shakespeare. And then the Royal Shakespeare mounted it in 1979, and I played a much too juvenile, that's a flattering term, but I was Shakespeare. And then we brought it to London, to the Donmar Warehouse, as it then was. And there are some projects that never leave your system. It's like a virus that you can't get rid of. And Bingo was one of those, in the very best possible sense.
And yet on the face of it, it's not a flattering portrait of Shakespeare in the final years of his life. And one presumes that he's a hero of yours.
Well, the fact is, if he had not lived, I would have been out of work most of my life, because I got to spend years and years and years back in the 60s and 70s with the Royal Shakespeare Company performing him. And over that time, and I think I've done 28 of the 37 plays, and some of them more than once, you get a feeling for the writer. I mean, I have an instinct about bits that I don't think are Shakespeare, because it's like a chemical reaction. My body tells me, this isn't him writing at this point. It's like Act 1 of Titus Andronicus. Absolutely isn't William Shakespeare. And the moment that Act 2 begins and Aaron comes on and says, now Chimus Tamara Olympus top. Oh, here we are. I know who this is. So you said it's not a flattering portrait, but it's not unflattering either, because Edward is asking the question, what must it have been like for the man who had eventually in his career phenomenal success, including considerable wealth coming his way, to have become in his lifetime a national figure, and who had written the sonnets and As You Like It and King Lear and Twelfth Night, and then turned away from it all, gone back to this little market town in Warwickshire to live in the big house that he'd bought, second largest house in Stratford-on-Avon, for several years. What was going on? And one of the facts that we know about Shakespeare, because there's precious little, is that he signed a document during this time. And this is one detail that Edward Bond has constructed a view of who Shakespeare might have been at that time around this document.
And the significance of that document is that it protected Shakespeare's wealth, and it was damaging to those who are poor around him, which goes to, I suppose, to the heart of the question in the play, which is whether, and I think it's this question, is it enough to have written the likes of King Lear and Othello? And the answer is...
Well, it would seem the answer is no, but each audience member will have to make their mind up about that. The man who said, poor naked wretches, wheresoe'er you be that bide the pelting of this pitiless storm, how will your houseless heads, your unfed side, your looped and windowed raggedness protect you from seasons such as these? Oh, I have ta'en too little care of this. sign a document that brought misery, poverty, deprivation to large numbers of people in Stratford-on-Avon, in his hometown. And Edward Bond carries in the play, on the one hand, the great humanist poet, and on the other hand, the selfish Tory.
Now this is, and it does, that I suppose goes to the heart of it, doesn't it? It combines your loves. It's theatre, it's Shakespeare, and it's political. And you are a deeply political man.
It's been unavoidable all my life. Where I grew up, how I grew up, what my parents were subject to, our living conditions, my father's history and background. 2 years ago during the election, when I was working in Chichester doing bingo, the Chichester Festival Theatre, it was pre-election, and because I couldn't be campaigning in my own constituency, which is Bermondsey, I offered myself to the local Labour constituencies along the south coast of England to campaign. Well, you can imagine the nature of that campaigning for a Labour candidate. And one of the Tory candidates, I'm sure intentionally pejoratively, described me as a tribal socialist. And it was meant to be rude. And I took it as a great compliment, because it was my experience of the world and the experience of my parents in that world that made me a Labour Party supporter.
And you've said that when you're in a room full of Conservatives, you feel uncomfortable. You don't know how to behave.
Yes, that's very true. It is ingrained in some way. It's like Republicans in the United States. I have the same reaction to them.
Well, can we go to the United States? And we'll come back to your politics, because many people watching, listening to this will know you not as the Shakespearean actor, for which you have been remarkably successful, but as Captain Jean-Luc Picard. And I wonder, when you made the decision to give up what you were doing in the UK, go to Hollywood, and to take on a role which, if you think about it at the time, we're talking about when American television wasn't actually as good as it is now. Star Trek was rather old-fashioned and out of date. And you decide to take this role. And I wondered if a little bit of you, we all know how successful it's been since, but if a bit of you felt that you were selling out.
Not for a moment. I had never taken the prospect of this job seriously. I'd been auditioning for it for 6 months. And finally, it came down to myself and an unknown other actor. But never for one moment had I thought that they would ever cast me. So I got these free trips to California every now and again. I was working here. I was in this space when I went to do my second audition. And we were going to transfer the production I was doing then into the West End. But my agent in California, who had never negotiated a job for me before because it had never arisen, I was not an actor looking for Hollywood work. I think today it's a little different for a lot of actors. The focus so much is film and television and not theatre for actors. But my agent and everyone else I consulted in Hollywood reassured me that I need not fear the 6-year contract I had to sign, because not only would the series never make it for 6 years, it was unlikely to make it through its first season, because everyone said you cannot revive an iconic series. It's impossible. So come, make some money for the first time in your life, get a suntan, go home.
So in a sense, you were selling out because you didn't expect it to be any good. You didn't expect it to go anywhere.
That doesn't sound like selling out to me. My commitment was based on the fact that it was going to be a failure. And then I could come back here and go on doing Who's Afraid of Virginia Woolf.
And it was, of course, anything but a failure. It was just hugely successful.
One of our producers, one of my champions, because not everybody in Paramount wanted this bald English Shakespearean, middle-aged English Shakespearean in their series, said to me, this weekend more people will see you act than have seen you in your entire career to date, which was 27 years.
And boy, did they like you. You were subsequently voted sexiest man on the planet at one point.
Yes.
Was it, I hate to, it might sound a bit rude, but was it surprising to you?
It was gobstopping. I mean, not only that, but I was put on the cover of the TV Guide with Cindy Crawford. She won for the women and me for the men. And it seemed to me absurd, and still does. But I won't deny that it was pleasant. And I won't deny that it attracted some attention that I'd never attracted before.
Because you said about it at the time that you never expected to be the lead. You had grown up wanting to act, but not expecting to be lead roles. And of course, all you've had since has been those lead roles.
Yes. I was the wrong shape, the wrong background, the way I talked. I'd lost all my hair when I was 19. I had none of the obvious qualifications to be a leading man. And even today, it occasionally takes me by surprise. Don't get me wrong, I love being a leading man, and more than anything else, I love leading a company. I've always been a company actor. And to help to manage and design and support the way a group of creative people work has become a real pleasure for me.
So you pick up these other Hollywood roles, the likes of Professor Charles Xavier and X-Men, another hugely phenomenal film series, and yet you give it up. You give it up after 17 years. You do turn your back on it.
I loved my life in Los Angeles, and I had a very, very pleasant life too. Friends and family were horrified when they heard I was leaving because I had become a very cheap vacation touch for all of them. So, but I could not do the work in my heart I'd always wanted to do, which was really to be doing English classical theatre with the best group of actors that I could find, with some clever directors. That was all I'd ever wanted to do right at the beginning. And for years, that was quite satisfactorily fulfilled, that dream, by working for the Royal Shakespeare Company, occasionally in what might be called leading roles, but rather very often as a supporting actor. So I'd never even then seen myself as a leading actor. Although I'd done some interesting theatre work in New York, in Washington, in Los Angeles, it was not in a context that I could truly enjoy. The context was here, in London, in the UK. So I sold up, burnt my boats, and came back, and nothing happened for quite a long time, alarmingly so. And then the Royal Shakespeare Company opened their doors. Greg Doran invited me to play Antony in Antony and Cleopatra, and it led to 6, 7 of the grandest years of my life.
Did you think you had made a mistake then coming back?
Yes. Oh, yes. You know, excuse me, press nights always start late because we can't get you people, critics, in quickly. And the press night of Antony and Cleopatra, I was the first person, it's not that way in the play, but Antony came on first. So I'm standing in the wings for what seems like 20 minutes, waiting for the show to begin. And what I start to do is write the reviews in my head. And basically the reviews were, who the hell does he think he is? Coming back after 17 years and walking into a leading role? No. Get some time in, Patrick. Those are the kind of reviews I was reading in my head.
So when you saw the actual reviews, I mean, that must have been a moment to realise.
Well, the great thrill was to be working with Harriet Walter on the stage of the Swan Theatre, and a great company with Greg Doran in Antony and Cleopatra. And then the reviews were a lovely icing on that cake.